Two macaque monkey species in Asia are now considered endangered, and importation to America for laboratory testing hasn't helped. One of the nation's leading primate scientists tells us how it all happened on the PETA Podcast. Welcome to the PETA Podcast. I'm Emil Guillermo, your host for this inside look at animal rights. Brought to you by PETA, the largest animal rights organization in the world. On today's episode, it's officially an emergency when the Iucn, the International Union for Conservation of Nature, declares that two monkey species, notably the long-tailed macaque in Asia, are endangered. How did it happen? Well, a big reason is the importation by the biomedical industry in America, but not for the kind of research that gives hopes for a major breakthrough in science. The imported monkeys are used in bureaucratic, everyday toxicology tests to see if a new drug or substance might be toxic to humans. Useful, but not enough to endanger two monkey species, and not enough to subject the monkeys to the cruel toxicology test, not when there are non-animal options available. Dr. Lisa Jones-Engel, one of the top primate scientists in the country, was once at the Washington National Primate Research Center, but then she joined PETA when she realized traditional science was too often ethically challenged. She explained the situation with the macaques and what can be done to save them on the PETA Podcast.
So these two species are the long-tailed macaque and the pigtailed macaque. They used to be some of the most ubiquitous, some of the most commonly found monkeys throughout Asia. That's not the case anymore. And we can certainly point to their exploitation by the biomedical industry as one of the reasons that their populations have just crashed.
I guess we're really like the monkeys I saw when I visited Thailand not too long ago. And they were always outside caves, and there were signs that say, don't feed the monkeys. And of course, people did, but I believe they were macaques.
They were. And so those would have probably almost certainly been the long-tailed macaque. And the long-tailed macaque is this beautiful little monkey. You know, the males, the big adult males, the alpha males can weigh, I don't know, a really big, juicy buff one is probably 7, 8, 9 kilos. Their tail, they're called long tails because their tail is basically as long as their body. Yeah. And so they use that for balance as they're bouncing around the trees. The females are beautiful. They have a little bit of white eye makeup on, this nice facial hair. They are absolutely devoted. Both the males and the females are devoted parents. These are monkeys that humans have had a relationship with them for millennia.
Yeah.
But that relationship it's in the toilet right now.
Well, when they say, so these are the long-tailed macaque. That's what I saw in Thailand and in Malaysia, all the way down to Kuala Lumpur. I just remember there. I saw them as, say, like I would look at pigeons in a park because I was on a railing or on some long steps, and they were all over. There were just monkeys all over.
They used to be all over. I don't know when the last time you found yourself in Cambodia or Thailand or Vietnam or the Philippines or Indonesia or Myanmar or Laos or Bangladesh. Actually, in the last 3 generations, and so a macaque generation is about 13 or so years. Over the last 3 generations, scientists have shown that there's been at least a 40% decline in those monkey populations. And based on what we're seeing now in the existing monkeys that are left and all of the hazards that they are facing, most notably their extraction for use in experiments, we expect that there's going to be the potential for a 50% decline over the next 3 generations. Species cannot survive that.
And so they're endangered now. Do they get protection? Do they get a kind of, because I wasn't there very long ago, maybe 5 years ago, and they seem to be all over.
Yeah.
But now there's been that much of a drop.
There has been that much of a drop. Much of the drop can be traced to this massive, outrageous, unsustainable, and horrifically cruel kind of grabbing up of them during the COVID pandemic.
So the significance, how this drop in the population?
Significance is that we're going to lose this monkey species if this continues. And the way that we need to stop it is first, we need people to pay attention to these long-tailed macaques. We need people to understand that this assessment that the IUCN, so the IUCN, the International Union for the Conservation of Nature, puts out a red list, and it's called the Red List for Threatened Species. And this is not some willy-nilly kind of, today I think I'm going to put this animal on it or that animal on it. In order for these animals to be evaluated, to be assessed, it is a years-long process where scientists who are working in these countries, scientists who are working around the globe, get together. They look at all the data. There are in-country population surveys, census surveys done on these. And then the scientists sit down and they come up with this very detailed 25, 30-page assessment of what's going on, what are the threats to these animals, how many animals are left, and basically then the IUCN says, okay, they take all this information and they establish these criteria. So these monkeys were then listed under a very specific criteria that puts them in the endangered status, and that's huge. But we're just getting started on what we need to do to protect these monkeys.
All right. So now you said a lot of this was due to the fact that they were gathered up. They were used in labs. Is that how they were gathered up, or the purpose?
Monkeys are money. Literally, we talk about the price per tail. We were seeing that in each of these countries, the value for a wild-caught long-tailed macaque was skyrocketing to the point that anyone who would see any monkeys anywhere, whether it was kind of in their farm or over near temples or in a protected area or in these urban areas, these folks were highly incentivized to go out and to get these monkeys. And they captured them in some of the most brutal and horrific ways that you could possibly imagine. The footage is out there. So PETA just actually, we released a video last week that's narrated by Kate Del Castillo. And it's, 2.5 minutes, and we lay it all out there. We have some footage from Action for Primates showing how these animals, their sleeping trees are cut down, they're netted, the infants are grabbed, the moms are stuffed in cages. And then these monkeys then start this horrific process of being kind of channeled and funneled to commercial breeding farms, and then to another farm, and then into a truck, and then into a belly of a plane, and then to the US, and then into the laboratories. Boy,
and you'd think that after that, they'd like a dumb tourist like me giving them pieces of fruit and stuff. That was like what they were used to. I mean, so I'm getting back to my personal experience with monkeys, which was I go to a temple, or I go out to a cave, or I go to like some steps going up to a temple. There were monkeys all around, and they had signs to say, don't feed the monkeys, and some of us did. But are you saying that since I had my trip to Asia, there were people grabbing the monkeys off the street?
Absolutely.
And
absolutely.
Oh, wow.
100%. Absolutely. It's we're seeing the undercover investigations, we're seeing the documentation is out there. The populations have just crashed. Now, that doesn't mean that if you go to a place like Lopburi in Thailand, which is a very famous it's a city that is for decades has been kind of this monkey central. And it's famous for having big monkey feeding festivals and whatnot. There are pockets of these monkeys that are the longtails that remain. But when you look at the entire species, you look at the whole global distribution of this species, and what the assessors, what the IUCN have agreed upon is that population is absolutely crashing. And it's crashing in large part for these longtails because they are being demanded and rounded up and exported for use in biomedical experiments.
So what kind of experiments are they used in, and why are they so valuable?
They're valuable because the experimenters have decided that, hey, this is the fastest way that I can take my drug. And the FDA requires me, before I try to get this drug to market, as part of my preclinical testing, I've got to take this drug and I've got to jab it into a large animal, a large non-human animal. And unfortunately, long-tailed macaques in particular have been that animal of choice.
Why is that? Because they're just large enough but small enough too? Is it because they are docile, or they're not? I don't recall them being particularly docile, but what is it about them or because they were so plentiful?
You actually, all of those things that you said, size matters, perceived availability matters, the fact that for centuries, the long-tailed macaque has been able to coexist with humans. It's not just that long-tailed macaques are really good at reading us, and they really are. So as you were walking up to that temple, I guarantee you, if you were carrying a plastic bag or if you had a backpack draped over your shoulders, those monkeys sussed you up really quickly.
Oh, yeah.
And they said, this is an easy mark. He's distracted. He's looking at this beautiful Watt over here, and he's looking at these bells over here, and bam, the next thing you know, you lost your bag. And in that bag happened to be, there were some nice biscuits in there. There might have been some crackers. And this is because these monkeys know us, and they observe us, and they work together in ways that, wow, it is a beautiful thing to watch. But for those who are on the receiving end of it, it's less
pleasant. Yeah.
Less pleasant. Exactly.
Yeah. But all right. So they know us. That means they're smart.
They're so smart. They're so smart. And they're so incredibly social. And, like I mentioned, when they're being trapped, the adults will fight to their death to protect each other, to protect their infants. What happens in the laboratory is that these animals are put in individual cages, tiny individual cages that have a bar at the back that you can pull it forward so the monkey gets squeezed up to the front of it. They are smaller than some of the other macaques, the other macaques that are used for basic research. But it's not so much that they're docile in the labs. It's just that they're broken. Their spirit is broken. They are everything that they need to be the extraordinary animal that they are. The wise, the clever, the engaged, the alert animal is deprived.
They're lost.
Exactly. Their essence is lost. And they're certainly lost from the wild. And that's the thing that no one is really talking about, but which we talked about in the assessment. When those monkeys are removed from these countries in South and Southeast Asia or from Mauritius, this biomedical industry is taking a keystone species out of the environment. And a keystone species is a species that has a really important role that it plays in the ecosystem. We actually know for a fact that long-tailed macaques and pigtailed macaques are really important buffers for some of these vector-borne parasites. So there are mosquitoes that, if the macaques are there, the mosquitoes feed on the macaques. They get their blood meal on the macaques. Those mosquitoes who may be transmitting things like malaria or dengue, it stays within the macaques. And the macaque's immune system actually can handle this really well. You take those macaques out. You remove them from that ecosystem. You remove them from that edge that between the humans and that other environment. And those mosquitoes look around and they say, I'm hungry today. That person looks really tasty.
So
it's the consequences for those individuals who are living in Asia by taking removing these monkeys from their forests. The American or the U.S. Experimental or animal experimentation industry, not only are we killing those monkeys, we're now threatening the lives of those individuals who live in Asia and Mauritius because we've removed these monkeys from that ecosystem.
So the monkeys, when they say they're gathered, they're taken from Asia and they're brought primarily by the U.S. biomedical industry to the U.S.
Exactly. The U.S. is the number one consumer importer of these long-tailed macaques.
And are they
number one?
Is it pharmaceutical labs, corporate pharmaceutical labs? What kinds of experiments are these monkeys used in?
So think about it as kind of a pipeline or a supply chain that's going on here. So you have U.S.-based companies that have set up facilities in places like Cambodia and Mauritius, where these longtails are. The companies, frankly, they launder wild-caught monkeys. So there are all these monkeys that are being caught up because each one of these animals is worth a lot of money now. So they're being dropped into the system. They're then flown to the U.S. They land in major U.S. airports like JFK or Chicago. They're unloaded, taken to some undisclosed site where they undergo a CDC quarantine because the CDC knows that these animals, the potential for them to be bringing in dangerous infectious diseases is very, very high. From the quarantine facility, they're then distributed again. They're trucked to places around the U.S. where the monkeys sit for a little bit, and then they go to the next stage. And so the vast majority of the long-tailed macaques end up in toxicology, studies, lethal dose studies at these contract research labs. The long-tailed macaque is not the macaque that's used for basic research, or that there were no long-tailed macaques that were used in the development and the preclinical testing of the Pfizer or the Moderna or the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. That was a completely different monkey, different species of monkey.
So basically they use these for like skin test or?
No, they use them. They take a compound, they take a drug, and they want to decide, what is if I put this drug in this macaque, what's going to happen? Is the macaque going to get sick? How much of this drug can I put, this novel drug that we've never tried on humans, but we think, maybe it's going to, help us, treat diabetes, Alzheimer's, cancer, whatever. A drug that's kind of been developed in the laboratory. They keep pumping it into these long-tailed macaques until they get to the point of like, okay, it seems like this monkey hasn't dropped over dead on its own. Let's now go and try this in clinical trials. We all know, because NIH has told us so, that 95% of what works in these animal models, what's tested safe in these animal models, these monkey models, fails when it hits the human market.
Could they use any other animal? Do they have to use monkeys, or monkeys are just there, so they use them?
This is part of the FDA requirements. There is a law still on the books, and we are really hoping that the FDA Modernization Act will actually change this law. But there are requirements that say before something goes into a human arm or leg or down a human throat, it actually has to go into one of these large mammals. And unfortunately, the long-tailed macaque, as well as beagles, have been tapped as that non-human animal.
And yet we know that it's not very useful. It doesn't say anything, or it's not helpful in terms of translating to how it can either help humans.
How many more times do we as a society, as a scientific community, how many more times do we need to fail before we understand that trying to make this leap between the immune system of a monkey or a beagle or a mouse or a zebrafish to what actually happens when these compounds are in human cells, it's not working. It's simply not working. And yet, when COVID hit, these monkey experimenters doubled down on this. And they said, hey, just give us more monkeys and we'll give you this vaccine really quickly. And we've talked about this before. At the very beginning of the pandemic, Moderna and Pfizer, they came out very clearly saying, gosh, monkeys don't get infected the same way with SARS-CoV-2. They don't respond the same way that humans are to SARS-CoV-2 infections. So we're just going to check this regulatory box. We've got this mRNA vaccine that we developed. We're going to drop it in a handful of rhesus macaques, not long-tailed macaques, Indian origin rhesus macaques. We're going to drop it into these monkeys, and actually we're then going to really focus on what we know is the way that's going to give us important information. We're going into human trials. If we had relied on monkeys, we'd all still be sitting here in our basements with our masks.
They still use some monkeys though. They use the rhesus, right?
They used a very different type of monkey. And let's take just a few minutes and talk about different types of monkeys, because that is something that is simply, that's gotten lost in all of this. I read some of the stuff that the journalists are putting out there that, the people are just kind of talking about. A long-tailed macaque, a pigtailed macaque, a Chinese origin macaque, an Indian origin rhesus macaque. Those are very, very, very different animals. Not only are they different species, Macaque fascicularis versus Macaque mulatta, but the scientific community knows that not only are species differences critical and have profound impact on some of the drugs and tests that we use, but even within species, a Cambodian long-tailed macaque, its physiology, immunology is very different than a long-tailed macaque from the Philippines or a long-tailed macaque from Mauritius. And yet, even the scientific community, and certainly the public, and boy, the journalists, are just thinking, a monkey is a monkey is a monkey.
It seems hard to believe that the scientists, the researchers who, they're sensitive to the kind of results they get, the kind of readings they get, they wouldn't know the difference between the species, and they wouldn't be able to say, well, we better not use this monkey, we better use some other one. Or
you would think, right?
Yeah.
You would think that would be good science would be driving those decisions. But as we saw, that's not the case. It's about availability. What can I get my hands on today?
It's availability, but also they have to make sure they check off the box that they've done what they need to do.
Exactly.
The big animal. Yeah. So, all right. So the kinds of experiments, it's not like we need these monkeys because it's critical to the science necessarily. It's more critical to the bureaucracy and the policy.
We know that the alternatives are out there. And if we were spending a fraction of our research dollars that we've been kind of blowing on these monkeys that we've driven to the point of extinction, if we had been spending that money on these alternatives, on developing these organoids, on developing the 3D printed tissues, on even just something as accessible as computer modeling, wow, we would be so much farther along. We have driven 2 species of primates to the edge of extinction over our greed and our misuse. We're going into these countries throughout Asia and into Mauritius, and we're extracting these animals. We're using them for our gain, And the people there are suffering. And good God, the monkeys are paying the ultimate price.
Well, I keep hearing there's a shortage of monkeys for experiments. And so is that true? Are the scientists just happy to have monkeys? Is there a shortage?
Scientists are using macaques for right now are the kinds of things that, you've got the Elizabeth Murray, who's using rhesus macaques and scaring them with snakes and spiders. You've got experimenters who have monkeys hooked up to and strapped into restraint chairs for hours on end as they stare at video screens and decide whether they like this logo or that logo. The waste, again, the arrogance of this curiosity-driven science has been catastrophic. The monkey shortage. But a few years ago, PETA looked at the 7 national primate research centers. And we looked at the total number of monkeys that they had, and it's almost always macaques, the total number of animals that they had in their facility, and the number of animals that they had actively engaged on research projects. About 30%. There are a lot of monkeys in this country. And the ones that are being bred in this country are Indian origin rhesus macaques. And that's because for decades and decades, scientists have used the Indian origin rhesus macaque. That is their preferred, albeit highly flawed, macaque model. The monkeys that are coming in, these long-tailed macaques, they're not bred here in this country for the most part. And that's because the system it's been easier, it's been cheaper, and no one has been looking while these big corporations, these big importers go over to Asia and Mauritius, and they literally shake the trees, round these animals up and bring them over here. And I cannot stress enough, these long-tailed macaques do not go into basic research. These are not the monkeys that we're using to develop vaccines.
So when they're brought in, it's kind of a waste?
It's a horrific waste. It's a waste of monkey lives. It's a waste of taxpayer dollars. And again, these animals are going into the toxicology studies. They're going into the biopharmaceutical, and they are being used for, again, drugs that have a 5% chance of actually going to market and being effective. There have been 1 million macaques brought in the last few decades, 1 million of these animals. And those are the ones, these long tails, who have survived to make it into the plains and land here in the labs. There have been countless more that actually die during the trapping. They die in these fetid, disease-ridden commercial monkey mills that we see in Asia and Mauritius. The amount of monkey biomass, macaque long-tailed biomass that have been destroyed by this industry it is staggering. And for what?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to imagine, and they're not, as you say, they're not even used in the kind of research science that may lead to any kind of treatments to humans. They're used for toxicology, which is you want to make sure no one gets a rash. You want to make sure that from a substance. And there are certainly other ways to test for toxicology.
Absolutely. And that's the thing. So this is the field researchers, those of us who have spent our careers kind of on the ground in Asia or Mauritius, kind of right with these animals, observing the population levels, observing the way they interact with other people. We were seeing the species really just kind of, it's like it's being sucked down this giant funnel. And I mean, each time there'd be fewer and fewer of them there. So we saw what was happening. And so when the IUCN, this uplisting, this moving them from vulnerable to endangered is critical, because this is now, people understand the word endangered. The average person in the public, we know an endangered species is not something that you stick in a cage and pump full of drugs if you have any other choice. And we have other choices. And so what I'm counting on, what I'm betting on, is that when the public hears this, when they know that these are endangered species in these cages, that these are endangered species in the bellies of these planes or in the backs of these trucks that are going around the country, the public is not going to stand for that. You don't do that to an endangered species. You don't do it to any species. You especially don't do it to an endangered species. And so I believe that as this gets out, as people hear this, as people understand what this means, that there is going to be a profound backlash against this industry. And we're going to make sure that everyone hears that. So we've gone to members of Congress with this information. We're going to the CDC with this information. And we're saying, look, stop. It is now time. It's actually way past time. But the importation of these species of primates must stop now. In the CDC, you need to act. And I think Congress, we're getting really, Congress is coming back to us and saying, wow, this is outrageous. This is ethically untenable. Scientifically, it's not working. This is not the country that we are. We cannot take endangered species from other countries, drop them into cages here, pump them full of drugs that don't work. That's not going to happen. People are going to listen to this.
Once again, you were saying how many monkeys come in, is there a number, how many monkeys have been depleted from places like Asia and then brought in, and the dollar amount that the monkeys represent to the bioresearch community?
This is a multi-billion-dollar industry. The CDC has been incredibly tight-lipped about releasing figures on the number of monkeys that are coming in. We can look at the CITES export database, and what we know that is we're averaging about anywhere from 30 to 40,000 macaques are pouring into the U.S. every year. No wild population can withstand that onslaught. Since 1975, 1.25 million macaques were leaving Asia.
So right now, now that they are considered endangered, but they're considered endangered by this group, are they officially endangered enough to make people like Congress or people like the biomedical industry pay attention?
The IUCN, I wouldn't describe them as a group. I would describe them as kind of the world's authority on the conservation and the status of every plant and animal that we have on this planet. This isn't these are the people who know. These are the people who invest in the science, who invest in the time, who really, like, these are the authorities. That being said, they are not a regulatory body. So the IUCN Red List of threatened and endangered species, it's an incredibly powerful tool that the authorities, like the CITES authorities, actually, they refer to this. They're going to look at this and say, oh my God, the long-tailed macaque, the pigtailed macaque, we're looking at a 50% decline over the next 3 generations. It's time then to move these animals to an Appendix 1 status of CITES. And when these animals are moved to Appendix 1, that's where the regulatory authority, the regulatory muscle comes in, and where kind of everything changes kind of legally about how these animals are treated, the type of permits that are used to handle. So that means that right now, again, what we're focusing on is getting, because we can make the decision. This country, the US Congress, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention can make the decision right now, tomorrow, based on the fact that these animals are endangered, that we've pushed them to the level of extinction, that they're lousy models for any types of human disease, and something we haven't talked about, the real threat that they represent for bringing in with them the next pandemic causing pathogen.
Could that happen? Is that real?
That's a very real potential. But again, we can make this decision. The CDC could close the door tomorrow with that. A study just came out. Actually, a study came out in July by a group called Traffic, and that was building on studies over the past 2 or 3 years, which have shown that there are 2 species of macaque that represent the most significant potential, the greatest risk for pathogens that are part of the wildlife trade to spill over into humans. One of those is the long-tailed macaque. And so really, I mean, how many more pieces of information do we have to have before we shut the pipeline down? They're endangered. We're hurting them. They could hurt us. And using them is hurting the people and the ecosystems that we're taking them from. And using them does not work. We don't, the data that we get from monkeys from these studies is incredibly misleading.
So we're going to hope that the PETA, when they ask the Centers for Disease Control, they end the importation of monkeys. And of course, we can ask our listeners to take action at PETA.org. So it seems pretty. Do we have any time? Is time of the essence?
Yeah, because every day that we don't act means more of these monkeys are dying. They're dying in the cages here. They're dying in the bellies of the plane as they're being transported. They're dying in the trucks as they're moving across this country. They're dying in the monkey mills in Asia and Mauritius. They're dying as the hunters and trappers beat them to death because they're trying to protect, those monkeys are trying to protect their friends. Time is of the essence. We've known for too long. We've got to stop wasting the monkey lives. We've got to stop wasting the taxpayer dollars. We've got to step up and do the right thing. We've got to do it right now. It's enough. What more do you need to see in front of you? Scientists, CDC, Congress, public. Stop. You have the power to stop this. So yeah, go to PETA.org. Sign the petitions. Let Congress know. Let the CDC know. Stop. We've got better things. These monkeys deserve so much more. We've taken everything from them. The very least that we can do is to stop this now so that they stand a chance, because they can rebound. These populations can rebound. But we can't continue what we're doing if we have any sense of moral and ethical duty. We have to stop this now.
Lisa, thank you very much for joining us on the PETA Podcast.
Thank you very much, Emil.
Dr. Lisa Jones-Engel, one of the nation's top primate scientists at the Washington National Primate Research Center, but now a PETA scientist, advocating for ethics in science. Find out more about the endangered macaques at PETA.org. And that's our show for today. Thank you for listening. Don't forget to send a link of this show to your friends. Tell them you like the PETA Podcast. Contact us at PETA.org. You can find me on Twitter at Emil Amok, that's EMILAMOK, or see my vlog at AMOK.com, or see my work at ALDEF, the Asian American Legal Defense and Education Fund. That's ALDEF, AALDEF.org/blog. Once again, thank you for listening. Check out all our episodes on your favorite podcast app or on Apple Podcasts, where you can subscribe to as well as rate and review the show. It helps get the word out about the issues you care about. Our music is provided by Carbon Works. Check them out on YouTube. And join us again next time for more insight into animal rights and the fight for a cruelty-free world on the PETA Podcast. I'm Emil Guillermo.